In today's warm-up, we were asked to factor the special cases that were given to us. So if we look at number 1, I immediately look at the 16, which is a perfect square. And if I divide my middle term, b, by 2, it should give me the square root of 16. So 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 4 squared is 16. So this is definitely a special case. I definitely want to know what the sign is in front of my b term, because that determines what sign goes in both of my factors. Since it was a positive 8, I have a positive 4 and a positive 4. This special case can be written because it's a square of x plus 4 squared. So let's look at number 2. 49 is a perfect square. The square root of 49 is 7. And if I divide my b by 2, I get negative 7. So in my parentheses, I should have x minus 7 times x minus 7. No, negative 7 times negative 7 is positive 49, so this works. But it can be written as x minus 7 to the second. Number 3, 25 perfect square. I would divide my b by 2 and get negative 5, and negative 5 squared is 25. So this is definitely a special case of x minus 5 times x minus 5, or the quantity of x minus 5 squared. So looking at 4, it's 9. Square root of 9 is 3, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So this would be x plus 3 squared. So let's look at 5. The square root of 121 is 11, and 11 doubled is positive 22. So we would have x plus 11 squared. And finally, on number 6, we have 1. The square root of 1 is 1. And if I double 1, I get 2. It will have to be a negative 1, though. So x minus 1 squared. For today's lesson, we are going to be expanding with these special cases to be able to help us solve quadratic equations in another way. All right, so let's start the lesson for solving quadratic equations by completing the square. Today's warm-up definitely helped us practice what we are going to be doing here in a little bit. So let's go ahead and talk about what completing the square means. What we are going to be doing is we're going to be taking our b term and dividing it by 2 and square it so that we get the special cases to be able to write it as a factor squared. So we're going to be taking our b, dividing it by 2, and squaring it to be able to set this process up. So the first thing we have to do in these problems is to get the x squared and the x by itself. So we're going to add 27 to both sides. Then we are going to bring everything else down. So x squared minus 6x. But we are going to add a blank here. And we're going to put that value we were talking about in this blank. Write the equals. 0 plus 27 is 27. And then we also have to add a blank on the other side, because whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So let's go ahead and find the value that goes into these blanks. We would take our b, negative 6, divide it by 2, and square it. So again, our b divided by 2 and square. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. And we're going to square negative 3, which gives us positive 9. So in our blanks, we are going to write positive 9 and positive 9. Then we are going to simplify. So I'm just going to bring down x squared minus 6x plus 9, which equals 27 plus 9, which is 36. From here, we're going to go ahead and rewrite our side over here as the factors, which we know that our number in our parenthesis is going to be -3 because we have our b divided by 2. So we're going to rewrite this as x minus 3 squared equals 36, because that's our special case and all we did was write x minus 3 squared. So now we're going to solve. We're going to take the square root of both sides. When we do this, we get x minus 3 left over, because the square root and the square cancel out, equals plus or minus 6, because when we take the square root, we have a plus or minus answer. Then, to get x completely by itself, we need to add 3. The 3's would cancel out. We would have x equals 3 plus or minus 6. Break it up for our two answers. X equals 3 plus 6. X equals 3 minus 6. So we would get x equals 9 and x equals -3. These are our two solutions for the quadratic, or where the quadratic crosses the x-axis. Let's look at example 2. X squared minus 12x plus 55 equals 0. Need to get the x squared and the x by itself, so we're going to subtract 55. Bringing this down, it would be x squared minus 12x, add our blank, equals -55, and our blank again. Let's take our b term, divide it by 2, and square it. So -12 divide by 2, square it. -12 divided by 2 is -6. Square -6, and we get positive 36. Add 36 here. Add 36 here. Simplify. So I'm going to use this -6 to be able to write my factors. It would be x minus 6 times x minus 6, which equals -19, which we knew that we could have simply just wrote this as x minus 6 squared equals -19. Solve for x, so we would square root both sides. This would leave us with x minus 6 equals the square root of 19. But this is where we need to stop because this is a negative number. We cannot have a negative radical, so this means that this quadratic has no real solutions. With more practice, these will become easier, and you will start seeing the patterns a lot easier. Okay, now let's look at example 3. X squared minus 16x plus 19 equals 4. It's not equal to 0, but our first step is still the same. We need to get the x squared and the x term by itself. So we would rewrite x squared minus 16x. You would draw the blank. Your equals. 4 minus 19 is -15. And again, you would add your blank. Take our b term, which is -16. Divide it by 2 and square it. -16 divided by 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 squared is positive 64. So we would write 64 plus 64 in both of the blanks. The negative 8 lets me know that in the factor it will be x minus 8. So I would have x minus 8 squared equals, and negative 15 plus 64 is 49. From here, we need to solve, so we're going to take the square root of both sides, leaving me with x minus 8 equals plus or minus 7, because the square root of 49 is positive or negative 7. Then we would add 8 to both sides. This would give us x equals 8 plus or minus 7. Split it up. We get x equals 8 plus 7 and x equals 8 minus 7. So x equals 15 and x equals 1. These would be both of your solutions. Okay, let's look at example 4. X squared plus 16x plus 63 equals 0. So we would subtract 63, leaving us with x squared plus 16 plus our blank equals negative 63 plus our blank. Take our b, divide it by 2. So 16 divided by 2 and square it. 16 divided by 2 is positive 8. Square it and we get 64. So we would add 64, add 64. When we simplify, since it was a positive 16, I forgot my x. Since it was a positive 16x, our factors will be x plus 8 squared equals negative 63 plus 64, which is positive 1. Typically, I would tell you guys to, stop me and tell me I forgot my x, but my bad, I forgot it, but it's in there now. So let's go ahead and take the square root of both sides. We would get x plus 8 equals, the square root of 1 is positive or negative 1. We would subtract 8, leaving us with x equals negative 8 plus or minus 1. Split it up. X equals negative 8 plus 1, and x equals negative 8 minus 1. So x equals negative 7, and x equals negative 9. And those are my two x-intercepts for this quadratic. So go ahead and get some good practice in with this concept of completing the square. We will be doing another lesson of it tomorrow to extend this concept, but we're going to tag on to this process where we have irrational solutions instead of rational. I hope you have a great day.